Hey everyone, I'm Liz Ferry and welcome to another episode of my Crochet Lessons series. In this episode, we'll be going over the process of making the invisible decrease in your crochet projects. Increasing and decreasing single crochet can be applied to many designs, but is essential in making amigurumi and other types of dolls. Decreases are the opposite of increases, and are used to make the width of the row grow smaller. There are 3 ways you can decrease. Each of these styles of decrease will create a different texture in your finished fabric. You can decide which method you like best, and which is most suitable for your project. In this video, I'll show you how to create the invisible style of decrease. This style of decrease is the most complex, but it looks the cleanest. For this project, you'll need to know how to make the magic circle, the chain stitch, the slip stitch, the single crochet stitch, and the increase. You'll also need to know how to crochet seamlessly. You can find all of these crochet lessons in the playlist at the end of the video, or in the description below. If you want to see my full video on what you'll need to begin crocheting, check out my crochet materials list video. For the process of making increases and decreases, you'll just need yarn, a crochet hook, and stitch markers. I'll be using a size H hook in this tutorial, so that it's easier to see what I'm doing. But it's important to note that if you're making something like a doll, you'll need to maintain a higher tension to keep the filling from leaking out through the stitches. Once you've had more practice in making increases and decreases, you can try using a small hook, like a size B or E, to create the more dense fabric needed for making dolls. You can either begin your row of decrease with a long chain, or you could continue working your decreases onto an increased flat circle, like the one we made in the increasing tutorial. That's what I'm going to do in this video. Just like when I was increasing, I'm going to decrease 6 times per row to keep the row flat. More than 6 increases will narrow the work much faster, resulting in a more ruffled shape. And fewer decreases will narrow the work slower, resulting in a more cone-like shape. Because I started the first row with the same amount of stitches as increases, the row divides perfectly evenly by 6. If you begin your work on a chain instead, it's a lot easier to divide the row perfectly when decreasing 6 per row if you use a number that's divisible by 6 for your foundation chain. So if you're doing that, try to use a number of chains divisible by 6 to begin your row. You can find the stitch to decrease on by dividing the total number of stitches in the row by the number of decreases, and then subtracting 1 from that number. Since I have 42 stitches in my last row of increase, and I'm decreasing 6 times, I would need to decrease the row every 6th stitch in my first row of decrease. Since I'm decreasing at the 6th stitch, I'm going to go ahead and single crochet into the first 5 stitches of my row. Now I've finished single crocheting into the first 5 stitches of the row. Next I'll show you how to make an invisible decrease. Usually when making a stitch, you work into both the front loop and the back loop of the stitch. You can see the front loop of the stitch here, on the side of the fabric that's facing you, and the back loop of the stitch here, on the side of the fabric that's facing away from you. To do an invisible decrease, I'm going to thread my hook through the front loops of the next 2 stitches, and pull up a loop around both stitches at the same time. So I'll insert my hook down and under the front loop of the next stitch, which would be the 6th stitch of the previous row, by sliding the hook underneath the front loop from behind. And then I'll insert the hook up and under the front loop of the next stitch, which would be the 7th stitch of the previous row, by placing my hook in front of the front loop of the next stitch, and then sliding the hook underneath the front loop from the front. Now the hook is threaded through both of the next 2 stitches. Now I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop through both of the front loops. Now, with 2 loops on my hook, I'll finish the stitch as though I was just making a normal single crochet by pulling a loop through both the loops on my hook. And here's the first invisible decrease. As you can see, it looks just like a normal single crochet. So I'm going to do that for every 6th stitch of the row. So I'm going to single crochet into the next 5 stitches. And then I'm going to create another decrease by pulling up a loop through the front loops of the next 2 stitches. So I'll insert my hook down and under the front loop of the next stitch by sliding the hook underneath the front loop from behind. Then I'll insert the hook up and under the front loop of the next stitch by placing the hook in front of the front loop of the next stitch, then sliding the hook underneath the front loop from the front. And now the hook is threaded through both stitches. Next, pull up a loop through both stitches. And then pull another loop through the 2 loops on the hook to finish the decrease with a single crochet. Then again, single crochet 5, and then decrease by pulling up a loop through the front loops of the next 2 stitches, and then single crochet to decrease. And I'm going to continue to decrease every 6th stitch all the way around the row. Alright, I've gotten to the end of my row of decreasing every 6th stitch. Now I have 36 stitches in the row. To find the next stitch to decrease on, you could divide the total number of stitches by the number of decreases and subtract 1, which would mean the next row of decreases is on the 5th stitch. You may notice, though, that in the increasing tutorial, I increased every 6th stitch of the row in my last row of increase. Then I decreased every 6th stitch of the row for my first row of decrease, and now in my second row of decrease, I'm going to decrease every 5th stitch of the row. Since decreases are the opposite of increases, I'm going to decrease in the opposite order that I increased in that video. I'll decrease every 5th stitch of the next row, then every 4th stitch in the row after that, then every 3rd stitch in the row after that, all the way until I'm decreasing every single stitch of the row for my last row of decrease. In this next row, I'm going to decrease every 5th stitch. So single crochet into the first 4 stitches of the row. And then into the front loops of the next 2 stitches, pull up a loop, and single crochet to decrease. Then single crochet into the next 4 stitches, then decrease again. Pull up a loop into the front loops of the next 2 stitches, and single crochet to decrease. And I'll continue to decrease every 5th stitch until the end of the row. Next, I'll continue the pattern of decrease until the last row. In the next row, I'll decrease every fourth stitch with 3 normal single crochets in between each decrease. Then every third stitch in the next row, with 2 normal single crochets in between the decrease. Then every second stitch in the next row, with just 1 normal single crochet in between decreases. And in the last row, I'll decrease every single stitch of the row. So for this last row, I won't add any normal single crochet stitches in between my decreases, and I'll just decrease every stitch of the row. If you're making something that you're going to stuff, like a pillow or a doll, you should make sure to add your stuffing before decreasing all the way, so that the hole is big enough to get the stuffing in. Now I'm done with my last row of invisible decrease. So now I'm going to slip stitch to the first stitch of my row to end the work, and cut off my yarn. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, give it a like and share it on social media. And if you'd really like to help out the channel, you can donate to my Patreon. You can get some pretty cool perks through Patreon, like seeing my videos early, access to some of my prototype patterns, and discounts in my Ravelry store, depending on your level of donation. You can find out more about that at patreon.com/fairyrings. You could also subscribe and click the bell icon so you don't miss the next episode of this series when it comes out. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!